Hey everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and in this tutorial I want to talk to you about how I split my hems in a top-down sweater and in a bottom-up sweater. The sweater I have right here is the My Lopi Sweater by Sweater Freak. It's a beautiful top-down yoked pullover that's supposed to have a traditional ribbing at the bottom, meaning that that ribbing would just continue around and around as I've been knitting it in the round and not have any splits in the side of the sweater. But a split hem is basically, the idea is that you look at the two sides of your sweater and you decide that you want your hem to have an opening on the side so that, you know, there's a little bit more free movement at the bottom of the sweater. And that's something that I like to do with a lot of my sweaters, and I'm just going to show you how I think about it and execute it here. So in the case of a top-down sweater, you are very likely going from knitting in the round to knitting in the flat, because you're going to start working back and forth across just the front stitches of your sweater, and then once that's complete, you're going to start working just back and forth across the back stitches of your sweater. The other thing to be aware of is your number of stitches. So for any kind of ribbing, as you might imagine, you need to make sure that you have the right multiple of stitches. So if I'm going to do a 1x1 ribbing, I need to make sure I have a number of stitches that's divisible by 2. If I were going to do a 2x2 ribbing, I'd need a number of stitches that was divisible by 4. In the case of a split hem, you have to remember that the only stitches you're working with are the stitches that are either in the front half or the back half. So you're no longer looking at the number of stitches that you totally have on your sweater. You're looking at the number of stitches you have on this half of your sweater. Now, because that number may or may not be divisible by 2 or 4 or whatever multiple you need for your hem stitch, you need to make sure that you either add a stitch or delete a stitch depending on the number of stitches that you have. So in my case, I have 86 stitches on the front and 86 stitches on the back, and I've marked them off with these little side markers to let me know where the front and back should be split. And 86 is a good number for me because I'm going to do a 2x2 ribbing, which means I need a multiple of 4, which would get me up to 84, plus 2 additional knit stitches for the other edge. So if I start over here with a knit 2, purl 2, I want to make sure I end with a knit 2, which means I need 84 stitches, which is a multiple of 4, plus 2, so that I can have those extra knit stitches on the end. I think having knit stitches on either end of your flap for your split hem just makes it look more finished and neat. So basically you just want to make sure you have the number of stitches that you need, plus any additional stitches to be able to put those finishing edges on the hem that you're adding. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this sweater, of course, is that since it's knit top down, this would be the orientation in which you're knitting. So you'd have the entire sweater kind of on your lap, and you'd be knitting in this direction. So as I turn things around and talk about this sweater, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. The last thing to think about is where you are in a pattern. So my particular sweater is just plain stockinette stitch knitting, so I'm not going to be interrupting any kind of cables or lace or colorwork by changing my hem. But if you had any other patterning on the lower portion of your sweater, you'd want to give some thought to where you're placing your hem, how you're splitting it, and whether or not you're going to interrupt any of those stitch patterns that you have going on. So let me get this oriented so that I can knit on it, and I'm going to show you what I've done so far. As I mentioned, I have these little markers on the side telling me where my split is actually going to happen. So these front 86 stitches are going to be my front hem, and then back here, those 86 stitches will be my back hem. And right now we're just going to work on the front. So what I've already done is I've started knitting 2 and purling 2 with my ribbing all the way across. You can see I've begun here with 2 knit stitches followed by 2 purl stitches, and as promised at the other end, I'm ending with 2 knit stitches. Now, this other marker I don't need anymore because it's just gonna fall off my needles, so I'm gonna set it aside. And now that I've reached the edge, I'm going to turn my work so that I can work back across the wrong side of the front, purling 2 and knitting 2 as I go because I've just reversed everything, right? Now I use the same needles I don't need to add any other needles in here. I just know where the split is going to be, because you'll start to see that you're building up fabric on the side of the hem that you're actually working on. So this front portion of the hem is indeed already longer than the back portion. And if you were to try to line them up, you'd see that you have more fabric here than here, and the split is really relatively visible. Now, if you're worried about it, you could always keep some kind of marker there to remind yourself, but I think it'll become pretty obvious as you're knitting and purling on your ribbing back and forth where you need to stop on each side of your sweater. Okay, so our split hem is finished. You can see this is the back piece and this is the front piece. And I want to show you just one quick little trick that I do for reinforcing that center part right where it splits. You can see on this side I've already completed it. I basically run the tail of yarn through this extra couple of stitches here just to give it a little bit of extra toughness and strength. So we'll do that on this side and I'll show you how we go. If you don't have a tail, you can create a tail by weaving in an end here, and then you'll have a tail there and you can use it. Or you can, if you have a tail down at the bottom, you can work it all the way up and then you'll have a tail at the center point. So let me get you on camera here so that you can see what's going on. So my yarn is over here, and what I want to reinforce is this middle part right here. So I'm going to follow the natural way that the yarn goes in the stitch. And then if you follow that yarn through, it's going to go right through here and right through here. So I'm going to go through there. And then I'm going to come back down here. And you can see that I've basically completed an extra stitch. And what that means is that it just has a little bit of extra reinforcement there. Now I'm just going to work my yarn into the next loop here so that I can weave in my end. Now if I really wanted to, I could go back across that if I were really worried about it, but this is pretty sturdy yarn and that seems like an extra little fix there. So I'll just weave in my end back here and we'll be finished. So both sides of our split hem have been reinforced now, and all this sweater needs is a good wash before it's ready to wear, which is very exciting. So let me move on to a bottom up example for you. Now we're going to move on to our bottom up example, and this might not look like much, but it is the ribbing for both halves of a bottom up sweater. This one's going to be the Weatherman, and just like My Lopi Sweater, the Weatherman does not have a split hem built into the pattern. It's just something that I like to add to pullover sweaters so that there's a little bit more give at the bottom of my sweater around my hips. So here you can see I have one piece of ribbing, and I've used a little removable stitch marker here to show me which side is the right side and which is the wrong side. Just a reminder to make sure that I'm on the right track. Just like the other ribbing, this ribbing has 2 knit stitches on each edge. So there's knit stitches here and 2 knit stitches over here as far as finishing goes. And this is the other piece. And this is the... See, I have a stitch marker attached to this one as well to show me which is the right side of the work. And what we're going to do is attach these two. So to join these two pieces together, we're going to do a couple of things. First is make sure that we are working with the right side, and we have that little removable stitch marker to make sure that we're doing that. And we have our working yarn, which is the darker color here, the really dark brown, attached, because we've just completed working a right side row of our ribbing, so it's ready to go. And then we want to make sure we have the other piece of ribbing in the right place, and it will also have the right side up, so that when we join them together, we're making sure that our right side is meeting our right hand side. Now some people prefer, when they're working a split hem from the bottom up, to actually overlap those stitches, either with the front piece over the back or the back piece over the front, depending on the style that you're going for. And basically it's both a style thing and it can help to reinforce that split. Now I'm not going to do that in this case, but if you wanted to, there are some really great videos out there in the YouTubes, and I will link to a couple of them below in the notes and description. So now that we are all oriented correctly and we have the right sides of both of our fabrics here. I'm going to actually undo the last stitch on this side, and in order to join them, I'm going to knit two together right here, just to create a little bit of a stronger join. And then I'm actually going to work in stockinette across. I'm not going to continue the ribbing. So for this particular pattern, that's what I need to do, is to move on to some stockinette. And so I'm going to continue my way around this particular side, and then I'll meet you back here to show you what it looks like to join the other halves of these two hem pieces. So I've made the join here, as we talked about, with that knit two together, and I knit all the way across on the right hand side of the fabric. And now I need to join this end into the picture. So we're going to do the same kind of thing that we did before. Come over here. I have 3 needles. I know that looks a little scary, but it's not really going to be. And I'm going to knit up to my last stitch. I'm going to take that last stitch, just to make things a little easier, and put it over here on my left hand needle, and then I'm going to knit those two together just like I did on the other side, and continue on my way around. So let me go back to that join here for just a second, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, let's go back and look at that join. You can see again we did the knit two together, so we have a nice join going on there. I think you can see that on the camera. We have our knit stitches on this side, our knit stitches on this side, so we have nice finished edges to our split hem. And you can see that this particular side has a couple of yarn tails, but one in particular right up there at the join. And so I'll take this yarn tail and I'll duplicate stitch just a little bit back and forth there to reinforce that split in the hem. But from here on out, all I'm going to do is continue to knit in the round, and in this particular pattern I'm just going to be working in stockinette all the way around up to the armpits. So that is how I work a split hem from the bottom up. Knit 2 separate pieces and then join them with something like a knit 2 together, or as I said, you could do the overlap if you like that style a little bit better. All right, so that's the end of this tutorial about adding a split hem to your sweater, whether it's a top down or a bottom up pullover. Hit me up in the comments with any questions, and happy knitting.